I'll pay you $100,000. The offer landed between us like it weighed more than money. Victoria Hayes didn't blink. Her hands rested neatly on the conference table, her face calm enough to make a statue look emotional. I need a boyfriend for 6 months. I almost laughed. Instead, I stared at the contract waiting in front of me. You can't be serious. I never joke about business. That much was obvious. Everything about her office felt expensive, from the glass walls to the city stretching below us. I had spent the last hour taking promotional photos for Hayes Corporation, hoping the payment would cover another piece of my late mother's hospital debt. Instead, I was being asked to become someone's fake boyfriend. My fingers brushed the edge of the papers. There has to be someone else. There is. She folded her hands. They all want something after the contract ends. Her eyes met mine. You don't. She was right. I didn't want love. I didn't have time for dreams. Every month, another bill arrived with my mother's name still printed across the top. Every month, I watched my savings disappear. The bank didn't care that she was gone. Debt never attended funerals. What exactly do I have to do? Attend public events. Live with me. Travel when necessary. Her voice stayed calm. No romantic obligations. No feelings. No expectations. The words sounded easy. Almost too easy. What happens after 6 months? We walk away. She slid a pen across the table. No drama. No broken promises. Just signatures. The contract looked cold. So did the woman offering it. Still, $100,000 could finally give me a fresh start. I picked up the pen. I have one condition. A tiny wrinkle appeared between her eyebrows. Tell me, you treat me like a person. Something changed in her eyes. It disappeared almost as quickly as it came. You have my word. I signed. She signed. Our relationship officially began with ink instead of feelings. Moving into Victoria's apartment felt like entering another world. Everything had its place. Everything was spotless. Even the silence seemed organized. She handed me a key. Your room is upstairs. Our schedules are on the kitchen calendar. She hesitated for a second. If you need anything, the sentence faded away. She simply nodded and walked toward her office. The first week passed exactly like the contract described. Breakfast together, public appearances, photos for magazines, dinner, good night. No emotions, no questions, no real conversations. Then little things started changing. One rainy evening, I came home soaked after a photography job. A towel waited beside the front door. No note, no explanation. I smiled without meaning to. Another night, I worked until nearly midnight editing pictures. When I finally walked downstairs, a plate sat on the table beneath a food cover. The soup was still warm. Victoria stood by the balcony window with a laptop balanced on one arm. You skipped dinner. You notice? You get headaches when you don't eat. I blinked. You remembered that? Her shoulders lifted slightly. It wasn't difficult. She returned to her work before I could answer. That tiny moment stayed with me much longer than it should have. Weeks became months. People believed our relationship looked perfect. Sometimes, even I believed it. We attended charity dinners, business meetings, weekend events. Everywhere we went, cameras followed. Behind closed doors, life became strangely comfortable. One evening, the power went out during a storm. The apartment turned completely dark. I found candles inside a kitchen cabinet. Victoria stood beside me, trying not to laugh as I struggled to light one. I thought photographers understood lighting, natural lighting. The tiny flame finally came alive. There, she covered her mouth. A quiet laugh escaped anyway. It caught me completely off guard. You laugh? Don't tell anyone. I don't think they'd believe me. She rolled her eyes. They definitely wouldn't. That smile lasted only a few seconds. Still, it felt more valuable than anything written inside our contract. Sometimes I caught her watching me while I cooked dinner. Other nights we sat across from each other without speaking. The silence no longer felt uncomfortable. It felt peaceful. She started asking about my photography. I asked about the company. She admitted she hated fancy parties. I admitted I hated wearing expensive suits. Our conversations became longer. Her answers became softer. One night she walked into my small studio room while I edited portraits. The screen displayed dozens of photographs. She stopped at one picture. "When did you take this?" "The day it snowed." She stared at the image. It showed her standing beside a window. She wasn't posing. She was smiling at something outside. "I didn't know you took that." "You weren't looking." A long pause followed. She reached toward the keyboard before stopping herself. I looked. She searched for the word. "Happy." "You were." Her eyes stayed on the screen. I haven't seen that version of myself in years. Something inside me quietly hoped I had helped bring it back. That hope grew a little stronger every day. Daniel met me for coffee one Saturday afternoon. He leaned back after listening to everything. "So," he stirred his drink. "Are you falling for her?" I laughed too quickly. "It's a contract." That wasn't my question. I looked out the cafe window. Victoria's smile during the blackout. The warm soup. The towel. The quiet dinners. The photo. No. The answer sounded weaker than I wanted. Daniel smiled. "You're lying to yourself." "I'm being realistic." "You'd better be." His expression turned serious. "If she treats relationships like business deals, don't forget which side of the contract you're on." His warning stayed in my mind all evening. I tried convincing myself he was wrong. Deep down, I wasn't completely sure. 3 days later, we attended the company's biggest annual gala. Crystal lights covered the ballroom ceiling. Reporters crowded every entrance. Victoria slipped her arm through mine. It had become natural by then. Every camera flashed. "Smile." "I already am." "Try harder." "I charge extra." A tiny smile appeared. There it is. The photographers loved it. Inside the ballroom, executives greeted us one after another. Everything felt normal, comfortable, safe. Then the music seemed to disappear. Victoria stopped walking. Her hand tightened around my arm. I followed her gaze. A tall man stood near the entrance wearing an expensive navy suit. Confident smile. Perfect posture. Like someone who had never doubted his place in the world. He looked directly at Victoria. She didn't move. The warmth beside me vanished so suddenly it felt like winter had entered the room. The man walked closer. Every step carried years of history I knew nothing about. Victoria's breathing changed. Barely noticeable. Enough for me to notice. He stopped in front of us. His smile widened. "Victoria." She whispered one word. "Ryan." He glanced toward me. His eyes slowly traveled from my face to the hand linked with hers. Then he smiled again. "So." His gaze stayed on mine. "This is the replacement?" Everything inside me turned cold. "Ryan is staying for dinner." Victoria's voice came from the kitchen before I even took my jacket off. I stood in the hallway with my camera bag still hanging from my shoulder. We had plans. They changed. That was all. No apology. No explanation. The smell of food filled the apartment, but the warmth I used to feel every evening had disappeared. Ryan leaned against the kitchen counter as if he had always belonged there. His smile was easy. "Hope you don't mind." "It's not my apartment." The answer came out calmer than I expected. Victoria set another plate on the table. "Let's eat." Our quiet dinners had once become the best part of my day. Now every bite felt borrowed. Ryan talked about business deals overseas. Funny stories. Luxury hotels. People laughed. I mostly listened. Whenever Victoria smiled at one of his stories, a question kept growing inside my head. Had she ever smiled like that because of me? Dinner ended. Ryan grabbed his coat. "I'll see you tomorrow." Victoria walked him to the door. They stood there talking for another 10 minutes. I couldn't hear the words. I didn't need to. The next morning I found 2 coffee cups already sitting on the dining table. Ryan wasn't there anymore. Victoria picked up one of the cups. He stopped by early. Before work, he needed advice. She took a sip. "I hope you don't mind." There it was again. That sentence. As if I were a guest living in someone else's life. Days slipped by. Ryan always seemed to be nearby. Lunch meetings became dinner meetings. Dinner meetings became late-night meetings. Sometimes Victoria didn't come home until after midnight. Her side of the apartment stayed dark until I heard the front door unlock. One night, I waited in the living room. The clock passed 11, then 12. Finally, she walked inside. "You stayed awake?" I thought we'd eat together. A tired smile crossed her face. I already had dinner. Oh. She noticed the untouched plates on the table. You cooked. I wasn't sure when you'd be home. Her eyes rested on the cold food. I'll make it up to you. You don't have to. She looked as though she wanted to say something else. Instead, she picked up her laptop. I still have work. The office door closed. The dinner stayed exactly where it was. I threw it away an hour later. My phone buzzed while I worked on a photography project. A message from Victoria. Running late. Sorry. I smiled. At least she remembered. Before I could answer, another notification appeared. A company social media post. There she was. Ryan stood beside her at an expensive restaurant. Both of them laughing. The photo had been taken less than 20 minutes earlier. Running late. Sorry. The words suddenly meant something very different. I locked my phone without replying. Claire found me outside the company building a few days later. She carried a stack of files against her chest. You look tired. So do you. She gave a small laugh. Working with Victoria, it usually does that. I hesitated. Has Ryan been around a lot? Claire nodded carefully. He has. They seem close. Her smile faded. I shouldn't get involved. You don't have to. She took one step closer. Just don't lose yourself trying to understand someone who doesn't understand herself. Then she walked away. Those words stayed with me much longer than she probably expected. The contract still had 6 weeks left. 6 weeks. I repeated that number almost every day. Maybe things would settle down. Maybe Ryan would leave again. Maybe I was overthinking everything. Hope could be a dangerous habit. The company anniversary celebration arrived sooner than I expected. Hundreds of guests filled the ballroom. Music floated through the air. Champagne glasses clinked together. Victoria stood on the stage beside her board members. Ryan waited only a few feet away. The event host smiled toward the audience. Miss Hayes, would you like to introduce your special guests? Victoria took the microphone. Her confidence never wavered. I'd like everyone to welcome someone very important from my past. She turned toward Ryan. He recently returned, and I'm grateful we've had the chance to reconnect. Applause echoed across the room. Ryan thanked everyone with an easy smile. Then Victoria looked toward me. And this, a tiny pause, is Ethan. Another smile. My temporary partner. Temporary. One word. Just one. It landed harder than any insult could have. People clapped politely. Someone even laughed. Nobody realized they had just watched my heart break in front of hundreds of strangers. Ryan glanced at me. There was no victory in his expression. He already knew he had won. The party continued. Conversations filled every corner. I couldn't hear any of them clearly. Victoria approached a few minutes later. Ethan, I kept my eyes on the crowd. You could have called me your boyfriend. Our arrangement isn't permanent. I know. The words tasted bitter. I signed the same contract. She studied my face. I didn't mean to embarrass you. You didn't. Another lie. She reached toward my sleeve. My body moved before my mind did. Just one step back. Her hand stopped in the air. I have to greet the investors. Of course. Business first. Always. She disappeared into the crowd. Nobody noticed me leaving. The apartment felt strangely peaceful that night. I walked upstairs, opened the closet, pulled my suitcase onto the bed. Every folded shirt felt heavier than the last. My camera, my notebooks, my mother's necklace. One by one, the room slowly stopped looking like mine. The framed photograph still sat on the shelf. The one where Victoria laughed during the blackout. The smile she never wanted anyone else to see. I held it for a long time. Then I placed it gently beside the contract. Both belonged together. Both had become memories. A sheet of paper waited on the dining table. The contract. Every page perfectly signed. Every promise perfectly clear. No emotions. No expectations. No broken promises. She had followed every rule. The only mistake belonged to me. I had treated a business agreement like the beginning of a real life. I picked up a pen. At the bottom of the final page, I wrote only one sentence. Thank you for keeping your word. I folded the papers neatly, placed the apartment key on top. Then I added the framed photograph beside them. The picture faced upward. Maybe she would remember that smile. Maybe she wouldn't. Neither answer belonged to me anymore. The elevator doors closed. I stood inside with my suitcase beside me. Nobody stopped the elevator. Nobody called my name. When the doors opened downstairs, the night air greeted me instead. Daniel answered on the second ring. You sound different. I need a place to stay. You leaving? I already did. His voice softened. I'll be there in 10 minutes. No questions. You'll tell me when you're ready. That was all I needed. Hours later, I sat on the edge of Daniel's guest bed. The room was small, simple, quiet. My phone buzzed against the nightstand. The screen lit up. Victoria, where are you? My thumb rested over the message. I remembered the cold dinners, the unread promises, the word temporary. The screen slowly went dark again. I left it unread. You've hidden long enough. Daniel dropped a folder onto the kitchen table before taking a sip of his coffee. Open it. I glanced at him. What's inside? Your future. The folder held an application for a city photography exhibition. I laughed under my breath. That's for professionals. He leaned forward. You've been one for years. I shoot weddings, company events, and family portraits. You create stories. His finger tapped one of my printed photographs. The only person who never believed that was you. I stayed quiet. Maybe he was right. Maybe I had spent too much time trying to become enough for someone else. Daniel folded his arms. You left the apartment. Yes. You left the contract. Yes. Now stop living like you're still trapped inside it. Those words stayed with me all day. That evening I filled out the application. I almost deleted it twice. Instead, I clicked submit. Life slowly found a different rhythm. The mornings became quieter. Nobody rushed through breakfast carrying business reports. Nobody canceled dinner because another meeting appeared. Daniel's apartment was small, but it felt honest. One evening he tossed me a set of keys. My old studio. I caught them. You still have it? Hardly use it. A grin spread across his face. Turn it into something worth remembering. The old studio had dusty windows and peeling paint. Most people would have walked away. I walked inside and smiled. It reminded me of myself. Worn down. Ignored. Still standing. Weeks passed. The exhibition accepted my work. That single email changed everything. Photographs I had taken over the last 5 years finally hung inside a real gallery. People stopped in front of them. Some smiled. Some cried. Others stood quietly, reading the small stories beside each picture. A little girl pointed at one photograph, showing an elderly couple holding hands. They still love each other. Her mother nodded. You can tell without words. I swallowed hard. That picture had taken me 5 minutes to capture. The feeling inside it had taken those two people a lifetime to build. The gallery owner approached before closing time. I've already sold 3 pieces. I blinked. 3. And someone wants to hire you for a magazine project. He handed me a business card. They specifically requested you. The card trembled slightly in my fingers. For months, I had measured my value by someone else's attention. Now strangers believed in my work before even meeting me. The feeling was strange. Quiet. Real. My phone still carried Victoria's unread message. I never deleted it. I never answered it either. Every few days another notification appeared. Hope you're okay. Can we talk? Please call me. The messages became shorter after that. Then they stopped completely. I wondered if she had finally accepted my choice. Part of me hoped she had. Another part remembered every peaceful dinner we once shared. Healing wasn't a straight road. Some mornings I woke up smiling. Other mornings I reached for my phone before remembering I no longer lived with her. Each day became a little easier than the last. Across the city, life inside Hayes Corporation continued without me. I knew that because Claire called one afternoon. I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all. She sounded exhausted. I wanted to congratulate you. You saw the exhibition? The entire office is talking about it. I smiled. That's unexpected. There are other things they're talking about. Her voice lowered. Ryan. My smile faded. What happened? He has become comfortable. What does that mean? He walks into meetings like he owns the company. A pause settled between us. Victoria doesn't seem to notice. Or maybe she doesn't want to. Claire sighed. I don't know anymore. Before hanging up, she added one quiet sentence. Take care of yourself, Ethan. You too. Days later, I ran into Margaret Hayes outside the gallery. Victoria's mother recognized me immediately. I've been looking for you. That surprised me. I didn't expect that. Her eyes wandered across the photographs hanging behind me. You took all of these? I did. They're beautiful. The compliment sounded genuine. She turned back toward me. Victoria hasn't been herself since you left. I stayed silent. Margaret continued. She barely eats. She works until midnight. She canceled family dinners. I listened without interrupting. Finally, she lowered her voice. I thought your relationship was just business. So did I. She looked genuinely confused. I never realized. Neither had I. Not until it ended. I hope she finds whatever she's searching for. Margaret nodded slowly. I think she already lost it. The magazine project brought more opportunities. New clients. Better equipment. Enough money to pay off the final piece of my mother's hospital debt. The bank employee slid the receipt toward me. Congratulations. I stared at the paper for several seconds. Paid in full. My shoulders felt lighter than they had in years. Outside the building, I looked toward the sky. Mom. A small smile appeared. We made it. Not because someone rescued me. Because I finally started believing I could stand on my own. That same afternoon, Victoria walked into the apartment carrying takeout boxes. A habit she had started months ago. Her smile faded when she remembered nobody was waiting inside. The dining table stood exactly as she had left it. 2 chairs. 1 empty apartment. 1 framed space on the shelf where our photograph used to sit. She placed the food down anyway. The room answered with silence. Her phone buzzed. Ryan's name appeared. She answered. I'm downstairs. I'll be right there. When she reached the lobby, Ryan stood beside a luxury sports car. Busy day. The usual. He opened the passenger door. Dinner. She hesitated. I already brought food home. You can eat later. He flashed the same confident smile that had impressed everyone else. Victoria studied him for a moment. When was the last time you asked how I was doing? His smile slipped. What? You always ask about meetings. The company. The board. The investors. A longer pause followed. What about me? Ryan laughed awkwardly. You're overthinking. Maybe she was. Maybe she wasn't. She quietly closed the passenger door instead of getting inside. I'll drive myself. That night she wandered through the apartment. The towel I had once left folded after she came home soaked from the rain was still inside the hallway cabinet. The mug I always used sat untouched. A cookbook rested open on the kitchen counter. 1 page carried tiny pencil marks beside her favorite soup recipe. She gently traced the handwriting with her fingertips. Little memories kept appearing. A blanket folded over the couch after she fell asleep during a movie. Medicine waiting beside a glass of water when she caught the flu. Fresh flowers replacing old ones without anyone mentioning them. None of those moments had asked for attention. None of them had come with conditions. Love had been hiding inside ordinary days. She simply hadn't noticed. The next morning, the atmosphere inside Hayes Corporation felt unusually tense. Claire entered Victoria's office carrying a thick folder pressed tightly against her chest. She didn't sit down. She didn't smile. We need to talk. Victoria looked up from her laptop. What happened? Claire placed the confidential documents on the desk. Several financial records slipped across the polished wood. Highlighted numbers covered nearly every page. Victoria's eyes moved from one transfer to another, then to the signature at the bottom. Her face slowly lost its color. Every document pointed to the same name, Ryan Brooks. He had been stealing from the company. I can explain. Ryan stood across Victoria's office, but even his confident smile had started to crack. The folder of financial records stayed open on her desk. Every missing dollar, every fake invoice, every forged approval. The truth covered page after page. Victoria didn't raise her voice. Start with one question. He swallowed. Which one? Were you ever planning to tell me? His eyes drifted toward the window. I was going to pay everything back. When? Soon. She let out a slow breath. You've been taking money from my company for months. It wasn't like that. What was it like? Ryan stepped closer. I needed help. You needed my money. He opened his mouth again. Nothing came out. She reached into a drawer and pulled out the security pass she had given him. It landed on the desk between them. We're done. His face turned pale. Victoria, we're done. He stared at her for several seconds, hoping she would change her mind. She never did. Without another word, he picked up his coat and walked toward the door. Just before leaving, he stopped. You'll regret this. She didn't answer. The door closed behind him. This time, it sounded like the end instead of a beginning. I was hanging photographs for another exhibition when Daniel walked into the studio. You've got a visitor. I wiped the dust from my hands. Who is it? He glanced toward the entrance. You'll probably want to decide that yourself. Victoria stood outside the glass door. She looked different. The expensive business suit was still there. The confidence wasn't. Dark circles rested beneath her eyes. She held something carefully with both hands. Daniel quietly disappeared into the back room. I opened the door. What brings you here? She lifted the object she had been carrying. The framed photograph from the apartment. I thought this belonged to you. It belonged to both of us. A faint smile appeared. I kept finding it in different rooms. What do you mean? I couldn't decide where to put it. She looked down at the frame. So I stopped trying. I stepped aside. You can come in. The studio smelled like fresh paint and old wood. She slowly walked around the room, stopping in front of several photographs. You've been busy. I have. They're beautiful. Thank you. Her fingers brushed the edge of one frame. I should have come sooner. I leaned against a work table. Why now? She took a long breath. Because I finally know who Ryan really is. I waited. He lost everything overseas. He came back because my company was successful. Another pause. He never came back because of me. Those words carried more pain than anger. I'm sorry. She nodded slowly. I know. No. I shook my head. I'm sorry you had to learn it that way. Her eyes lifted toward mine. You aren't angry? I was. The answer surprised even me. But not anymore. She reached into her bag and pulled out another folder. I found these. Several documents slid onto the table. One was a newspaper article that never got published. Another was an email chain. A third showed a payment receipt. I recognized all of them immediately. You kept those? I never even knew they existed. She looked from the papers to me. Claire found them in an old archive. I rubbed the back of my neck. It wasn't important. It was... Her voice almost broke. The newspaper article had accused Hayes Corporation of mistreating a charity partner. Months earlier, I had quietly tracked down the real source before the story reached the public. The email chain proved the accusation had been fake. The payment receipt came from my own bank account. I had hired a private investigator because the company was too busy to respond in time. You paid for this yourself. It solved the problem. It cost almost $10,000. I shrugged. The company's reputation mattered. She stared at me as though she had never truly seen my face before. You never told me. You already had enough to worry about. Her eyes filled with emotion she couldn't hide anymore. And I thought. She stopped speaking. You thought what? I thought you were only doing your job. The room became very quiet. Outside, traffic moved through the city like nothing had changed. Inside, everything had. She slowly walked toward another photograph. It showed an old man reading beside his wife in a hospital room. You always notice people. I tried. I never noticed you. Those words landed harder than any apology. I smiled sadly. I noticed. She closed her eyes for a moment. I remember the soup, the towel, the medicine, the flowers. I remember all of it now. Her voice grew softer. I kept thinking love had to be loud. She glanced around the studio. It was sitting across the dinner table every night. Days passed. She came back again, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with nothing except another honest conversation. She never asked me to return. Not at first. She simply listened. One afternoon, we sat on a park bench after visiting a photography market. The wind carried fallen leaves across the sidewalk. I visited the apartment. She kept her eyes on the trees. It doesn't feel like home anymore. I smiled gently. It never belonged to the apartment. She turned toward me. It was you. Neither of us spoke for a while. The silence felt different now. Not uncomfortable. Just full of things we both understood. Margaret called me a few days later. I owe you an apology. You don't. I judged you before I knew you. She paused. My daughter keeps talking about all the little things you did. I laughed quietly. They weren't little. No. Her voice warmed. They weren't. Before ending the call, she added one final sentence. I hope she earns another chance. I looked through the studio window. I don't know if that's possible. That evening, Victoria arrived carrying 2 paper cups. Hot chocolate. She handed one to me. You remember, you always ordered this when the weather turned cold. A small smile appeared between us. Real. Gentle. For a moment, it almost felt like we had stepped back into those quiet dinners. Then reality returned. She placed her cup on a nearby table. I've spent weeks asking myself the same question. I stayed silent. Why did losing you hurt more than losing Ryan? She answered herself before I could. Because I never loved the man who came back. A tear rested at the corner of her eye, but never fell. I loved the man who quietly stayed. My fingers tightened around the warm paper cup. A part of me wanted to believe every word. Another part remembered waiting beside untouched dinners. Remembered unread hope. Remembered being introduced as temporary. Love hadn't disappeared. It had simply stopped being enough. She took one careful step closer. I know I can't erase what happened. You can't. I know I don't deserve another chance. I didn't argue. But if there's even the smallest... Her voice faded. I'll spend the rest of my life proving I can become someone better. The honesty in her eyes made this harder than anger ever could. I still cared. That was the painful truth. But caring and returning were no longer the same choice. She slowly lifted her hand. Not demanding. Not expecting. Just hoping. The distance between us was only a few inches. Once, I would have closed it without thinking. Instead, I let out a quiet breath. Then I gently stepped back. You're leaving the country? Daniel lowered the brochure and looked at me across the studio. The photography agency's logo covered the front page. A 6-month project in Europe. Travel. Documentary photography. A chance to photograph places I had only seen in magazines. I nodded. They accepted my portfolio. A slow grin spread across his face. I knew they would. I'm still trying to believe it. He walked over and pulled me into a quick hug. You earned this. Those words stayed with me long after he left. Months earlier, I had accepted a contract because I believed money was the only way to change my life. Now a camera had opened a door no contract ever could. The email sat on my laptop screen. Departure. Monday. Only 4 days remained. I packed camera lenses instead of pretending to be someone else's perfect boyfriend. The difference felt bigger than the suitcase lying open on my bed. A knock interrupted my thoughts. 3 soft taps. I already knew who stood outside. Victoria waited beside the studio door. She wasn't carrying coffee this time. She wasn't carrying photographs. Only herself. You have a minute? I stepped aside. Come in. She slowly walked through the room, stopping beside the large window. The afternoon sunlight fell across the wooden floor. It reminded me of the first picture she had ever truly liked. I heard you're leaving. I am. When? Monday morning. She closed her eyes for a brief moment. So it's true. It is. Neither of us rushed the conversation. There was nothing left to hide. She finally turned toward me. I almost didn't come. What changed your mind? I realized I'd regret staying silent even more. A faint smile crossed my face. You're getting better at being honest. I learned from the best example I ever had. The compliment warmed me. It also hurt, because it came after everything had already fallen apart. She reached into her handbag and removed a thick envelope. I found this while cleaning my office. She placed it on the table. Inside was the extra payment from our contract. The bonus she had promised if everything ended smoothly. I never deposited it. It belongs to you. I gently pushed the envelope back. It doesn't. You completed the contract. I broke it first. Her eyebrows lifted. I left before the 6 months ended. You left because I gave you a reason. She folded the envelope and slipped it back into her bag. I still owe you. I shook my head. No. What do you mean? The debt between us isn't about money. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her bag. I've replayed those months every night. The dinners, the contract, the gala. She swallowed carefully. If I could erase one day. You can't. I know. A tear rested in her eyes, but she didn't hide it. I spent so much time protecting myself from getting hurt that I became the person hurting someone else. The room stayed quiet. Not because there was nothing to say, because the truth deserved space. She stepped closer. I loved you. The words arrived softly. I just realized it too late. My heart reacted before my mind did. For a brief moment, I remembered candlelight during the power outage. Warm soup waiting after work. The photograph beside the window. The smile she tried to hide. Those memories were real. So was the pain that followed them. I believe you. Her expression changed. You do. Yes. Hope slowly appeared in her eyes. Then I continued. But believing you isn't enough. The hope stopped growing. She searched my face as though one more answer might change everything. I can change. I know. I already have. I know. I'll spend every day proving it. I smiled gently. I hope you do. Confusion replaced hope. What does that mean? It means you should become that person. A long pause followed. Even if I'm not beside you. The words were difficult to speak. Not because they were uncertain. Because they were true. I forgave you weeks ago. You did. I had to. She took another careful breath. Then why can't we start again? I walked toward the window. Cars moved through the street below. People laughed. Others hurried home from work. Life never stopped because someone's heart had broken. I used to think forgiveness meant going back. I rested one hand against the glass. It doesn't. She listened without interrupting. Forgiveness lets me put down the weight I've been carrying. I turned toward her. Getting back together would mean picking that weight up again. Her lips trembled. I would never treat you that way again. I believe that too. The answer surprised both of us. I truly believe you've changed. Then why? Because the man standing in front of you has changed too. Months earlier, I would have accepted any small sign of affection. I would have waited outside closed office doors. I would have ignored lonely dinners. I would have convinced myself that tomorrow would be different. That version of me no longer existed. I loved you enough to forget myself. The words came quietly. I won't do that again. She lowered her head. I don't want you to. Another pause settled between us. I just wanted one chance to love you the right way. A sad smile found my face. I know. She reached into her pocket. The apartment key. I kept it. Her fingers slowly opened. I couldn't throw it away. I accepted it. Not because I planned to use it. Because it belonged to a finished chapter. I have something too. I opened my desk drawer. The original contract rested inside. The pages were slightly worn from being folded and unfolded too many times. She stared at it. I haven't seen that since the day I left. I carried it to the small paper shredder beside my desk. She understood before I touched the switch. A quiet tear slipped down her cheek. The machine hummed softly. Page after page disappeared. Every rule, every condition, every promise written without love. Tiny strips of paper filled the container below. Nothing remained. Victoria wiped her eyes and let out a slow breath. I think this is goodbye. I think it is. She stepped closer one last time. Instead of reaching for my hand, she simply smiled. A real smile. Gentle. Peaceful. I'm grateful I met you. I'm grateful too. She nodded. Then she turned and walked toward the door. Just before leaving, she stopped. Ethan. Yes. I'll spend the rest of my life becoming someone worthy of the love you gave me. You don't have to earn it anymore. She blinked. You just have to become someone you're proud of. A small nod answered me. Then she walked away. This time, neither of us tried to stop the other. Monday arrived with clear skies. Daniel drove me to the airport before sunrise. You nervous? A little. Good. He laughed. It means you're heading somewhere worth going. We hugged near the departure gate. Take pictures. I will. Come back famous. I'll settle for happy. He smiled. That sounds better. I checked my luggage, passed through security, found my seat beside the airplane window. Before turning my phone off, I opened my contacts. Victoria Hayes. My thumb rested on her name. No anger remained. No bitterness. Only gratitude for the lessons hidden inside the pain. I pressed delete. The screen asked one final question. Delete contact? Yes. Her name disappeared. Not from my memories. Only from the place where I no longer needed to search for it. Several months later, Claire sent me a short email after one of my photographs appeared in an international magazine. Victoria changed the company. She listens now. She knows every employee by name. She even started a scholarship for young photographers. I thought you want to know. I smiled at the screen. Some stories ended with people finding each other. Ours ended with both of us finding ourselves. Maybe that was always the ending we truly needed. The plane began rolling toward the runway. The engines grew louder. The city slowly disappeared beneath the wings. My phone remained silent. This time, the quiet didn't remind me of empty dinners or unread messages. It reminded me that I had finally chosen myself. As the plane lifted into the sky, I watched the clouds welcome a new beginning. Silence no longer felt lonely. It felt like freedom.